What's up, guys? Welcome to this episode of the GrowingAU Show. I'm your host, John Knott. So glad you can join me today. Look, real quick, I'm not wearing my glasses, so if you can count the number of times I try to push them up in this video with them not really being there, make sure to comment it down below. What's up, guys? I know this is the first time I'm talking to a lot of you in a while if you haven't been keeping up with the All About How podcast. We'll talk more about what's going on with the GrowingAU Show in a future episode, but today I want to specifically talk about the All About How podcast. So those fans out there that have been listening on the daily, we're going to talk about what's going on, because maybe you've noticed we haven't been posting any episodes on the All About How podcast for about the last week. For those of you that don't know, over the last basically 160 days, I have started a podcast, and I wanted to do that podcast every single day to answer the question, does more content equal more followers? By simply posting more, can you drive more traffic to your page? Can you convert more daily listeners to avid followers? Things like that. And that was the question we really wanted to answer. Can you become highly successful in the content creation space by simply posting a massive amount of content and not really focusing on things like marketing or SEO research or anything like that? And that's what we really wanted to answer with the podcast. And I now feel that after 160 days, we finally have an answer. For some of you, you might be thinking, well, I thought the podcast was every day for a year. Well, that was the initial plan. 160 days ago, the plan was we were going to post a podcast every single day for a year. And some things have happened that have caused me to kind of change that plan. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And really quickly, I do want to give kind of the stats for some of you here to talk about, does more content equal more followers? And I know what you might be thinking, well, more content, 160 episodes compared to, 1,060 episodes. Have we gone for 1,000 days? Is there going to be a difference there? Absolutely. Really, we can only talk about the stats and the amount of time that we pursued the podcast. So 160 days. And what did we see in that time period? Well, in 160 days, the total lifetime views or listens for the podcast was just over 2,600. And we're going to be comparing that here to the GrowingAU Show. The GrowingAU Show, we don't have that many episodes. These are very targeted, very highly specific marketed episodes. And we're going to be talking about how those, channel did in comparison to the All About How podcast. And basically, within about 3 months of this channel existing, we have our highest episode is over 16,000 views now. We've gained 1,200 subscribers on the channel. Thank you for that. And comparing that one episode at 16,000 views compared to 2,000 total lifetime views for the All About How podcast. One where it's just sheer content per day, and the other one where it is very highly targeted and marketed videos. We can see the difference there. 16,000 views, 2,000 lifetime total views. I guess we can really kind of see the difference that when it comes to producing content, it appears right off the bat that simply marketing your content, really doing the research, beats just putting out a sheer amount of content. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, well, 160 episodes really isn't a sheer amount of content, but what I do think is over that 160 days, as we posted more content, as more episodes got out there, we would have started to see an increase in views over time. And we did see a slow increase. You can see this graph here. This is the lifetime graph. We do have some jumps in that lifetime graph, but as you can see, for the most part, views remain relatively steady over the life of the podcast. Now, with that being said, does more content equal more followers? Yes, to a point, but no to another point. Yes, it can equal more followers, I believe, if you continue to do this over the extended period of time. As you can see, from the first couple episodes of the podcast to the last couple episodes of the podcast, we definitely had an increase in daily listeners. But the amount of time it took to get there as compared to the highly targeted and marketed episodes of the GrowingAU Show, the results are really not even in the same ballpark. We've had episodes in the GrowingAU Show, 16,000 views, 5,000 views, 7,000 views, 1,000 views. We've had a lot of success on these episodes, and those are one simple episode, one 10-minute episode getting that amount of views compared to, the 2,000 total lifetime downloads of the podcast. So we can see, does more content equal more followers? Yes, as we can see, that graph did increase, but not as fast as highly targeted and marketed content. So with that being said, though, why have we not posted on the podcast in a couple of days? Well, I've really kind of had to have a heart-to-heart with myself. I've talked with some good friends of mine who have listened to the podcast on a regular basis, and I've really talked about what the future of the podcast is going to hold. Mainly, my biggest thing with the podcast was, if you've listened to the whole thing, if you go and you sit down and listen to all about 160 episodes, which I have to say I'm relatively proud of. I mean, that's a lot of episodes there, and I'm very happy with it. But if you sit down and listen to those episodes, you're going to notice some very dramatic theme changes throughout the production of the podcast. As kind of interest changed, as the GrowingAU Show started to take off, the ability to do the podcast, the ability of what the podcast was focused on really began to change. And what ended up happening was I simply ran out of things to say. And the daily episodes of the podcast really became not so much me spreading high value to you, the listener, but it became more so me simply just kind of checking it off the list, right? It became me just simply putting out an episode because that's what I said I was going to do. And I do think there's a really great disciplinary lesson there, and that's a good disciplinary exercise. However, after about 160 days, I think that exercise kind of ran its course for me. And really, rather than simply going on there for what it was now amounting to anywhere from 45 seconds to 3 minutes a day to simply say a few words that I kind of came up with on the spot, I'd rather kind of say, all right, the All About How podcast answered its question for me. Highly targeted, highly marketed content does far better and gets a far higher reaction than just simply posting content. So for me, the question that I set out to answer, does more content equal more followers with the All About How podcast, by removing marketing, by removing targeting research, does it equal more followers? It answered that question for me, and that answer is not fast enough as compared to marketable posting and targeted research and things of that nature. So for me, it answered that question. I didn't need another, however many days until 365 to answer it. And so really what I kind of see there is, for me, it ran its course. I don't have a whole lot more to say on it, and I'm ready to move on to a new project, ready to give more focus back to the GrowingAU show, where we have a lot of active viewers and daily followers and things like that over here, and I want to be giving you that attention. So we're ending the All About How podcast. This is the last episode. This will be posted on the All About How podcast. I do appreciate everyone that listened, and it won't be my last podcast. This has now been the second podcast that I have produced, and each time I end up getting to produce a new podcast, it's really become a even more enjoyable experience. We get to learn more, and I definitely learned a lot by producing a daily podcast that was all about how. So I appreciate everyone who listened to that. I appreciate everyone who has continued to support the GrowingAU show. This episode does encapsulate the end of the All About How podcast, but it encapsulates the beginning of our next season of GrowingAU. A lot of you may have noticed a slight hiatus on my part. I'm just going to blame it on life. Life happens, college, work, everything that's going on in the world right now. Things happen, required me to step back from a bit, but I do believe now I'm moving into a point in my life where I can continue to do the GrowingAU show and kind of encapsulate what it was before, but also add some new stuff to it, right? We're going to be talking, not just about finance, but about success. We're going to talk about financial independence. We're going to talk about financial kind of emotional control as well, and just talking about doing the things that we can in life to pursue our own happiness and to pursue making the world a better place, as we always talk about here on the GrowingAU show. So for the fans of the All About How podcast, I appreciate every single one of you. I will miss you. Definitely come and check us out here on the GrowingAU show. For those of you that are watching the GrowingAU show right now, welcome to Season 2. I'm very excited to kick it off. This is kind of the first episode of Season 2. Welcome to it. And with that, let's get rocking and rolling. Thanks, guys.